Hey guys, tonight we are trading our comfortable pajamas for a heavy wool sheet and stepping into the most exclusive, exhausting, and surprisingly dangerous debating club in history, the Roman Senate. You are about to enter a world where people argue for 12 hours straight without a bathroom break, where a bad speech can ruin your career, and where the guy sitting next to you might be hiding a dagger in his sleeve. It's the kind of high-stakes boredom where you probably won't live past the first day if you don't know who to bow to, but hey, at least the architecture is nice. Before we start dodging chariots and political rivals, I want to remind you that tonight's journey is a long, slow burn, designed to let your mind drift. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me which city you are listening from and what time is right now. Are you watching the rain in London or enjoying a quiet night in Sydney? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up, not to the sound of an alarm clock, but to the roar of the beast. That's what they call it, the strepitus, the noise of Rome. It's 50 BC, and you are lying in your villa on the Palatine Hill. Even though you are one of the wealthiest men in the known world, sleep is a luxury you can't quite afford. The city outside your window doesn't whisper. It screams. You hear the grinding of wooden wagon wheels against volcanic stone, the shouting of drovers, the barking of stray dogs, and the rhythmic hammering of a blacksmith who apparently doesn't believe in rest days. You stare at the ceiling, painted with expensive red ochre and cinnabar, and realize that today is going to be another very long day of talking about absolutely nothing, yet deciding the fate of everything. You swing your legs out of bed. The floor is cold mosaic tile, chilling your bare feet. You aren't just a man. You are a senator, a paterfamilias, a pillar of the republic. This means you don't get to just roll out of bed and grab a coffee. You have duties before the sun even fully clears the horizon. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that sets the scene for your morning. The Roman day was rigidly structured around the sun. The first hour, ora prima, was strictly for business. For a man of your status, that means the salutatio or the morning levee. Before you can even think about the Senate House, you have to receive a parade of visitors in your atrium. You walk into the main hall of your house. The air is cool and smells faintly of beeswax and stale incense from the family shrine. The doors are thrown open, and there they are, your clients. Dozens of men, from poor shopkeepers to lesser aristocrats, are lined up to greet you. They are here to kiss your hand, ask for legal favors, or beg for a small handout of money called the sportula. You stand there, looking dignified, nodding, and pretending to care about a baker's lawsuit against his neighbor's goat. It's a transactional friendship. You give them protection. They give you their votes, and more importantly, their applause when you give a speech later. It's exhausting, repetitive, and absolutely necessary. If this line of people ever disappears, your political career is dead. As you greet them, you rely on a human smartphone. Standing just behind your left shoulder is a slave known as a nomenclator. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of night. The nomenclator was a specialized slave whose only job was to memorize the names and faces of every single person in Rome who mattered. He whispers into your ear, "That is Marcus the tanner. His wife just had a son." Or, "That is Lucius. Don't ask about his brother. He was exiled." You repeat the names with a warm, fake smile, looking like a man of the people, while your brain is entirely on autopilot. It's the ancient equivalent of having a teleprompter for social interactions. Without him, you'd be offending people left and right. And in Rome, an offended client is just a future enemy with a vote. The salutatio finally ends. The crowd disperses to wait for you in the street. Now, you have to actually get to work. You step out of your front door and are immediately hit by the sensory assault of the city. The air outside is different than in your villa. It smells of wood smoke, roasting garlic, unwashed bodies, and the distinct, sharp tang of the Tiber River, which is basically an open sewer at this point. You're surrounded by your entourage, your clients, your slaves, and your lictors, who act as human bulldozers to clear a path for you. You don't walk through Rome. You wade through it. You head down the Palatine toward the Roman Forum, the beating heart of the empire. The streets are narrow, winding, and shadowed by towering apartment blocks called insulae. You look up at these rickety skyscrapers of wood and mud brick, leaning precariously over the street. This brings us to a point of academic friction that keeps urban historians arguing in their faculty lounges: the population debate. Mainstream history often cites that Rome had a population of around 1 million people in the 1st century BC. However, a significant group of modern scholars argues that this number might be exaggerated, suggesting that the logistical limits of grain supply and water would have capped the population much lower, perhaps around 600,000 to 800,000. Others argue the opposite, claiming the density of the suburbs meant it was even higher. The debate isn't just about numbers. It's about how on earth this many people lived in a city with no zoning laws and no motorized trash trucks, whether it's 1 million or 500,000. To you, it feels like every single one of them is currently standing on your foot. You descend into the Forum Romanum. The noise amplifies. It's a chaotic symphony of commerce and politics. You pass money changers shouting exchange rates at the Temple of Castor and Pollux. You see lawyers practicing their speeches near the basilicas, shouting over the crowd to improve their projection. The pavement is white travertine, polished smooth by millions of sandals. You feel the vibration of the city through your thin leather soles. You aren't just walking to work. You are walking to the center of the world. Every glance you get is calculated. Other senators are walking too, surrounded by their own mobs. You lock eyes with a rival from the Cornelii clan. You don't wave. You exchange a stiff, formal nod. It's a Cold War fought with eyebrows. Finally, you see it, the Curia Hostilia. It's not the grand, marble-clad Senate house you might see in movies. That one, the Curia Julia, hasn't been finished yet. This is the old, venerable meeting house, a simple, somewhat boxy brick building that has stood for centuries. It looks almost too modest for the power it holds. It sits there, stoic and heavy, anchoring the chaos of the Forum. The doors are open, swallowing the light. You take a deep breath, inhaling the dust of the Forum one last time before you enter gloom. You know that once you cross that threshold, the physical noise of the city will fade, replaced by the much more dangerous noise of rhetoric. You step onto first stone stair, your entourage falling back. From here on, you face the wolves alone. You pause for a moment at the top of the marble steps, taking a deep breath before you cross the threshold into the Senate house. But before you can take that step, you have to do something that defines your entire existence as a Roman aristocrat. You have to heave a massive, terrifyingly heavy bundle of wool over your left shoulder and pray to the gods it doesn't slide off. You are wearing the toga, and if you think a modern suit and tie is uncomfortable, let me introduce you to the torture device that is Roman formal wear. In the 15th century, we talk about hollowed-out trees. In 50 BC Rome, the quiet struggle is simply trying to walk across a room without your clothes falling apart and exposing your dignity to the entire republic. You reach up and adjust a heavy fold of fabric resting against your neck. It's itching. It's always itching. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that usually gets glossed over in the movies. The Roman toga was not a bedsheet. It was not a light, airy piece of cotton that you could casually throw on. It was a massive, semicircular piece of woven wool, often measuring up to 18 feet in diameter and 6 feet in width. It weighed anywhere from 15 to 30 pounds, depending on the weave. Wearing a toga wasn't just a fashion choice. It was a physical endurance test. You are essentially draped in a heavy wool carpet in the middle of an Italian summer. The sweat is already trickling down your back, pooling in the small of your spine, but you can't wipe it away because your right arm is the only one that's free, and your left arm is currently serving as a structural support beam for the entire outfit. You look down at the intricate folds cascading across your chest. This morning, it took your most trusted slave, a specialist known as a vestispica, nearly an hour to wrap this thing around you. He had to drape it, pin it, fold it, and tuck it with the precision of an origami artist. You aren't just dressed, you are upholstered. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night: the pocket of power. The toga was folded in such a specific way that it created a large, pouch-like fold in the front called the sinus. This wasn't just decorative, it was your briefcase. Senators didn't carry bags. Instead, they stuffed their scrolls, their wax tablets, their money, and if things were getting particularly tense. A hidden dagger right into this fold of wool. You can feel the weight of a few heavy bronze coins and a seal ring shifting in your sinus right now, knocking against your ribs with every step. It's the ancient equivalent of a kangaroo pouch, but with more political intrigue and less fur. As you navigate the final few steps toward the bronze doors, you are acutely aware of your walk. You can't stride confidently like a soldier, you have to glide. The toga is designed to restrict you. If you move too fast, the friction vanishes, the wool slips, and you are left standing in your tunic looking like a fool. This was intentional. The toga was a garment of peace. It physically prevented you from engaging in manual labor or rapid violence. It signaled to the world that you were a man of leisure, a man who had people to do the running for him. You are trapped in a slow-motion bubble of high-status fabric. Now, as you adjust the umbo, the knob of fabric pulled tight at your waist to hold everything together, we reach a point of academic friction that keeps textile historians arguing in their museums. The shape debate. You might assume we know exactly what a toga looked like, given how many statues we have. But a significant group of scholars argues that we actually have no idea how the pattern was cut. Was it a perfect semicircle? Was it an ellipse? Was it a trapezoid with rounded corners? Experimental archaeologists have spent years trying to recreate the drapes seen on statues using different shapes of cloth, and they still argue about the geometry. Some historians suggest that the statues are idealized impossible drapes that never existed in reality, much like how a comic book superhero's cape defies physics. You might be wearing a garment that modern science can't quite figure out how to manufacture, which adds a layer of mystery to your itchiness. You step into the shadow of the portico, and the temperature drops slightly, offering a brief respite from the sun. But the toga has another surprise for you. You look down at the hem. It's dazzlingly white, almost blinding in the shadows. If you were running for office, which you always are in spirit, you would have had this toga treated with a specific process. This leads to another fascinating detail, the toga candida. To get this level of whiteness, the wool wasn't just washed. It was bleached with sulfur and then rubbed with white chalk dust until it glowed. This is where we get the word candidate, from candidus meaning shining white. You are literally walking around covered in chalk dust. If you brush against a dark wall, you leave a mark. If you hug a friend, you leave a mark. You are a walking piece of chalk, designed to stand out in the muddy, colorful crowd of Rome. But the downside is that the chalk dust mixes with your sweat to create a gritty paste in the folds of your elbows. It's a sensory nightmare that nobody talks about in the history books. The psychological weight of the toga is just as heavy as the wool. As you stand there, waiting for a senior consul to enter first, because etiquette is everything, you realize that this piece of cloth is your armor. In the chaotic streets of the Subura, you would be a target. But here, wrapped in the suffocating wool, you are untouchable theoretically. The toga marks you as a Roman citizen, a master of the world. It separates you from the Greeks, the Gauls, the slaves, and the women. It is a burden of privilege. You hate it, but you would die before you stepped out of the house without it. You finally move to enter the Curia. You have to turn your body sideways to fit through the crowd of other senators who are also trying to protect their drapes. It's a gentle, woolly collision of egos. You hear the rustle of hundreds of yards of fabric, a sound like dry leaves skittering on pavement. Watch the hem, Lucius. You mutter to a colleague who steps too close. If he steps on your trailing edge, the whole intricate structure could come undone, unraveling like a bad sweater. He nods an apology, gripping his own sinus tightly. You are all participants in a collective delusion that this is a sensible way to dress. The air inside the Senate House is stagnant, trapped by the thick brick walls. It smells of old wood, dusty stone, and the collective perspiration of 300 men wrapped in winter blankets during spring. You feel a droplet of sweat slide down your rib cage, tickling you. You can't scratch it. You can't reach it. You just have to stand there, looking stoic and imperial, while your skin screams for air. This is the first test of the Senate, the test of physical discomfort. If you can't handle the wool, you certainly can't handle the politics. You shuffle forward, your leather sandals scuffing against a mosaic floor. The quiet struggle of the morning has shifted from the mental load of the clients to the physical load of the laundry. You are a Roman senator, the ruler of the Mediterranean, and your greatest adversary right now is a 20-pound piece of chalky wool that wants to strangle you. You take a breath, adjust your left shoulder one last time, and prepare to find your seat in the most powerful room on earth. You have successfully navigated the crushing mob of the Forum and the treacherous, chalky folds of your own toga. Now, you stand inside the Curia Hostilia. The first thing that hits you is the acoustic change. The roar of the city outside, the strepitus, is instantly cut off, replaced by a cavernous, echoey hush that feels heavy with expectation. The air here is cooler, smelling of old, unpolished stone and the faint, metallic tang of bronze statues. It's a bit like stepping into a library, if that library was also a cage for the most dangerous political animals on the planet. You pause for a second to let your eyes adjust from the blinding Italian sun to the gloom of the interior. The only light comes from the high, open windows near the ceiling and the massive open doors behind you, casting long, dramatic beams of dust-filled light across the mosaic floor. Now, you have to find a place to sit. And this is where the reality of being a Roman senator clashes violently with the romanticized image of marble thrones and velvet cushions. You look around. There are no plush seats. There are no name tags. There are certainly no cup holders. The floor of the Senate House is lined with rows of wooden benches, known as subsellia. They are low, hard, and completely backless. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that often surprises people. The Roman Senate was designed to be uncomfortable. The layout wasn't a semicircle facing a stage like a modern parliament or theater. It was 2 blocks of benches facing each other across a central open floor. This meant you spent your entire day staring directly into the eyes of your political enemies. It was a confrontational geometry, designed for debate, not for listening. You skin the rows. The benches are filling up fast. You spot a gap on the second tier, halfway down the left side. You make your way there, moving with that gliding toga walk we talked about. Try not to trip over the feet of the senators already seated. You squeeze in. The bench is made of oak, polished smooth by the backsides of centuries of politicians. But it is unforgiving. You settle down, and immediately your spine protests. There is nothing to lean back against. If you slouch, you look weak. If you lean forward, you look aggressive. So, you have to maintain a perfect, upright posture for the next 8 to 10 hours. It's a core workout that no gym in the modern world can replicate. As you adjust your toga to provide a meager cushion between your anatomy and the wood, you look toward the front of the room. There, on a slightly raised platform called the tribunal, sit the magistrates, the consuls, and the praetors. They don't sit on benches. They sit on the famous sella curulis, or curule chair. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night. The chair of power was essentially a glorified camping stool. The sella curulis was an X-shaped folding chair with curved ivory legs. It had no backrest and no armrests. Why? Because power in Rome was supposed to be temporary. The chair was designed to fold up so it could be easily packed away when the magistrate's term was over. It was a physical reminder that your authority was fleeting. Also, some historians suggest a lack of a backrest was intentional to keep the magistrates alert. You can't fall asleep while ruling the Republic if falling asleep means toppling backward off a stool in front of 300 judgmental aristocrats. You, however, are stuck on the bench. And now begins a quiet struggle of personal space. The senator sitting to your right is a large man from the Emilia clan who clearly enjoyed a very garlic-heavy breakfast. He is man-spreading, taking up significantly more bench than his rank entails. His toga is spilling over onto your thigh. In the Senate, territory is everything. You can't shove him. That would be undignified. Instead, you engage in the subtle warfare of the elbow. You shift your weight, creating a firm barrier with your own arm, reclaiming your 6 inches of wood. He grunts, shifting away slightly. Victory. It's petty, it's childish, and it happens every single day in the halls of highest power. You look across the aisle at the senators facing you. They are close enough that you can see the sweat beading on their foreheads. This intimacy is terrifying. If things get heated, there is no security barrier, no aisle of safety. A man can leap across that central floor in 2 seconds. You realize that the architecture of this room creates a pressure cooker. The heat from hundreds of wool-clad bodies begins to rise, gathering in the high ceiling. The air grows stuffy. You catch the scent of expensive perfume trying to mask the smell of unwashed wool, creating a cloying, heavy atmosphere that makes your head swim. Now, as you look around at the crowded benches, we reach a point of academic friction that keeps architecture historians debating in their blueprints. The Sardine can debate. We know that Sulla expanded the Senate to 600 members, and Julius Caesar would later bump it up to 900. But when archaeologists measure the physical dimensions of the Curia Hostilia, and later the Curia Julia, the math doesn't quite add up. There simply isn't enough bench space for 900 men to sit comfortably. This has led to a fierce debate. Did many senators just stand in the back? Did they sit on the floor? Or, as some scholars suggest, was absenteeism rampant? Perhaps the full Senate rarely met, because if they did, it would have been a fire hazard. Some historians argue that the Paiderii, the junior senators, might not have had seats at all, literally standing for hours as a sign of their lower status. You look behind you, to the shadowed back of the room. It's getting crowded back there. You are grateful for your 6 inches of hard oak. The sensory experience of the bench is becoming a dull ache in your lower back. You try to shift your legs, but the toga restricts you. You are trapped in a pose of attentive dignity. You look down at the mosaic floor in the center of the room. It's an intricate geometric pattern of black and white tesserae. You find yourself tracing the lines with your eyes, a small mental escape from the discomfort. You wonder how many sandals have walked on those stones, how many drops of wine or blood have stained them. The floor is the only neutral ground in the room. It is the arena where the speakers will stand, pacing back and forth like caged tigers. You feel a vibration in the wood. The senator to your left is tapping his foot nervously. It's a rhythmic thump-thump-thump that travels through the bench and into your own body. Everyone is on edge. The Senate isn't just a legislative body. It's a rumor mill. You lean in slightly, trying to overhear the whispers circulating around you. Did you hear about Pompey? I heard Caesar is demanding a triumph. The gossip flows faster than the Tiber. You realize that the benches act like a telegraph wire, transmitting tension from one man to the next until the whole room is buzzing with anxiety. You place your hands on your knees, feeling the roughness of the wool. The stone walls of the Curia seem to be leaning in. The silence is deepening now. The shuffling of feet is stopping. The coughing is subsiding. The consuls are settling onto their ivory stools, arranging their purple-bordered togas. The quiet struggle of finding a seat is over. Now, the real endurance test begins. You are seated on a plank of wood that feels harder than granite, sandwiched between a garlic eater and a nervous foot tapper, wrapped in a blanket in a room with no ventilation. And the first speech hasn't even started yet. You close your eyes for a brief second, centering yourself. You are a Roman senator. You can endure anything, even this bench. The consuls are seated on their ivory folding chairs. The senators are wedged onto their hard wooden benches. The doors are open to let in the light, but the air is still heavy with the smell of unwashed wool and anticipation. By all modern logic, the meeting should begin. The agenda is full. There are grain supplies to discuss, provincial taxes to debate, and at least 3 different wars simmering on the borders. But nothing happens. Absolutely nothing. The presiding consul sits frozen, his hands resting on his knees, staring blankly at the back wall. The 300 most powerful men in the Mediterranean are sitting in total silence, and they will remain in total silence until a very specific report arrives from a man standing outside in a tent with a cage full of birds. You shift your weight on the oak bench, trying to relieve the pressure on your tailbone. This is the quiet struggle of Roman piety. You see, the Roman Senate isn't just a legislative body. It is a religious one. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that is essential to understanding your morning. In Rome, there is no separation between church and state. Every official act, every meeting, and every vote is contingent upon the auspices. The word comes from avis, bird, and spicere, to look. Before the Senate can discuss a single pothole in the Appian Way, the gods must be consulted to ensure they are in a good mood. If Jupiter is grumpy, the Senate is closed. It's as if the U.S. Congress couldn't open session until a groundhog saw its shadow, but with significantly higher stakes and more bureaucratic paperwork. You watch the entrance. Finally, a figure appears. It is a Polarius, the keeper of the sacred chickens. He doesn't look like a priest. He looks like a tired farmhand who happens to have a very high security clearance. He is carrying a wicker cage. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night: the Triputium Celestimum. While augurs often watch the sky for lightning or flight patterns of eagles, that was impractical for daily Senate meetings because, well, sometimes birds just don't show up. So, the Romans developed a portable on-demand prophecy system, the sacred chickens. The ritual was stunningly simple. The Polarius would open the cage and throw a handful of grain cake on the floor. If the chickens refused to eat, it was a bad omen and the Senate would be dismissed. If they ate, it was good. But the holy grail of chicken omens was a triputium, when the chickens ate so greedily that bits of food fell from their beaks and hit the ground. That was a resounding yes from the gods. The absurdity of the situation begins to wash over you. You are a man who commands legions. You own estates in Tuscany larger than some Greek city-states. To your left sits a man who conquered a province in Spain. And yet, all of you are holding your breath, craning your necks to see if a small, feathered dinosaur is hungry. The silence in the Curia is so deep, you can actually hear the scratch of claws on the wooden floor of the cage. It's a humiliating reminder that in the grand scheme of the cosmos, your political agenda is secondary to the appetite of poultry. You wonder, briefly, if the Polarius fed them breakfast. If he did, you're all going home. If he starved them, you're in for a long day. It's a theological system that seems suspiciously reliant on the metabolism of a chicken. The keeper tosses a grain. You lean forward, squinting through the dust motes. The chickens descend. They peck. They scratch. One of them grabs a chunk of grain cake and shakes its head, scattering crumbs. A collective sigh of relief ripples through the benches. The triputium has been achieved. The gods are happy. Or, at least, the gods are hungry. The consul nods solemnly, accepting this verdict as binding constitutional law. The cage is removed, leaving behind a few feathers and crumbs on the sacred floor of the Curia. Now, as the religious formalities conclude, we reach a point of academic friction that keeps religious historians debating in their archives, the sincerity versus manipulation debate. For centuries, historians, influenced by cynical Roman writers like Cicero, viewed this whole chicken charade as a complete sham. They argued that the aristocracy didn't believe a word of it. It was just a tool to control the ignorant masses or to legally block political opponents. There are famous stories of generals starving the chickens beforehand to guarantee a good result, or even throwing them into the ocean when they refused to eat, which, spoiler alert, usually resulted in the general losing the battle and drowning. However, a significant group of modern scholars argues that this view is too modern and too cynical. They suggest that the Romans, even the educated elite, were genuinely orthopraxic, meaning they believed that correct action was essential to maintain the Pax Deorum, the peace of the gods. They argue that even if a senator manipulated the system, he still felt a deep, superstitious dread if the rituals weren't performed. The debate is, was this political theater designed to stall legislation, or was it a genuine, terrified attempt to navigate a world filled with invisible, angry spirits? As you sit there, watching the consul dust off his hands, you suspect it's a bit of both. You've definitely seen a colleague use bad omen to filibuster a tax law he didn't like, but you've also seen that same colleague turn pale when a black dog crosses path. The delay, however, isn't over. The chickens were just the warm-up. Now the presiding magistrate has to perform the prefatio, a spoken prayer invoking a laundry list of deities. Janus, Jupiter, Juno, Minerva, the list goes on. You shift on the bench again. The wood is digging into your thighs. You are starting to feel hungry yourself. You didn't eat breakfast because the salutatio took too long, and now you're watching chickens eat while you starve. It's a cruel irony. You fantasize briefly about a piece of bread dipped in wine, but snacking in the Senate is strictly forbidden. It shows a lack of gravitas. The air in the room is getting warmer as the sun climbs higher outside. The smell of the incense burned during the prayer mixes with the smell of the damp wool togas, creating a soporific, drowsy atmosphere. This is the danger zone. If you nod off now, before the session even starts, you will be the laughingstock of the forum by noon. You pinch the skin of your wrist, hidden under the fold of your toga, just to stay alert. Finally, the consul stands up. He adjusts his toga, clears his throat, and looks out at the assembly. The gods have been fed. The prayers have been said. The birds have been consulted. The invisible barrier that prevents human business from happening has been lifted. The quiet struggle of waiting on the divine bureaucracy is over, and the mundane, messy struggle of human politics is about to begin. You settle back, bracing your spine against nothing but air, ready for the first speech. The chickens have done their job. Now it's time for you to do yours, which mostly involves sitting still and trying to look interested while someone talks for 4 hours about aqueduct maintenance. The consul has finally cleared his throat. The sacred chickens are back in their coop, and the gods have been duly flattered. Now, the actual business of the Senate begins. You might expect a free-for-all debate, a chaotic exchange of ideas like you'd see in a modern parliament or a particularly heated HOA meeting. But this is Rome. Spontaneity is frowned upon. The Senate operates on a rigid, calcified hierarchy that determines exactly who gets to open their mouth and who has to sit there and rot in silence. You lean back on your hard wooden bench, grateful that you are somewhere in the middle of the pack, high enough to be respected, but low enough to avoid the terrifying pressure of having to speak first. You look toward the front of the room. The speaking order is determined strictly by rank. First, the presiding consul calls upon the Princeps Senatus, the first man of the Senate. This is usually the oldest, most distinguished, and often most conservative ex-consul in the room. He sets the tone. If he says the sky is blue, the next 10 speakers will likely agree that the sky is indeed blue. If he says the sky is actually a lovely shade of imperial purple, well, the sky just changed color. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that dictates the flow of your day, the jus intensi dicendi, or the right to give an opinion. While technically all senators are advisors in practice, the floor is monopolized by the consulars, ex-consuls, and the praetorii, ex-praetors. They speak in descending order of seniority. By the time the debate reaches the junior magistrates, the sun is usually setting or the topic has been beaten death so thoroughly that there is nothing left to say but, "I agree with the guy who spoke 5 hours ago." But your eyes drift away from the powerful men at the front, past the mid-level strivers, all the way to the back of the curia. The lighting is worse back there, the shadows clinging to the corners of the brick walls. The benches are crowded, packed tight with men who are shifting uncomfortably, their togas bunched up against their neighbors. These are the junior senators, the ex-questors, the new money, the men from the lesser families who clawed their way into the chamber but haven't yet climbed the ladder. They are the silent majority of the Roman Republic. You watch them. They are leaning forward, listening intently, nodding sagely at the consul's speech, laughing a split second too late at his jokes. They are desperate to be seen, yet terrified of being noticed. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night. The Paiderii, this was the official, somewhat derogatory nickname for the men in the back rows. It translates literally to the footmen or the footer senators. Why? Because they were never allowed to speak. Their only function in the government was to vote with their feet. When a motion was finally called, the consul would shout, "Those who are this opinion, go to this side. Those who are the other opinion, go to that side." The Paiderii would then stand up and shuffle across the room to stand next to the senior senator they want to suck up to. They were quite literally human tallies. Their political career consisted entirely of walking from the left side of the room to the right side of the room, over and over again for decades. Imagine the psychological toll of that existence. You are one of the 600 most powerful men in the world. You have governed a small province. You have led men in battle. You own a vineyard that produces a very passable Falernian wine. And yet, when you come to work, your job description is background extra number 4. You watch Paidarius near the back wall. He's young, ambitious, likely from a wealthy family in the countryside. He's dressed in a pristine white toga that probably costs more than a gladiator's lifetime earnings. He has clearly prepared a speech. You can see him mouthing the words, rehearsing a brilliant point about the grain dole, just in case the consul miraculously points at him and asks, "And what do you think, Junior?" But you know, and he knows, that it will never happen. The quiet struggle for him isn't about governing. It's about maintaining his dignity while being treated like a piece of furniture. The room is stiflingly hot now. The smell of bodies is getting stronger. The Padarii are packed in so tight that they move as a single unit. If one sneezes, the man 3 seats down feels it. This physical compression creates a strange herd mentality. You watch a wave of reaction ripple through back benches. The consul makes a controversial point about taxing the knights. The front row remains stoic. The middle row murmurs. But the Padarii in the back? They look at each other, panic in their eyes, waiting to see what the big dogs do. They are the barometer of peer pressure. They cannot afford to have an original thought, because an original thought that lands you on the losing side of a vote could end your career before it even starts. Now, as you watch a group of them silently judging the consul's footwear, we reach a point of academic friction that keeps political historians arguing in their journals. The definition of silence. Scholars have long debated who exactly counted as a Padarius. Was it a formal legal class of senators who were strictly forbidden from speaking by law? Or was it just a slang term for anyone who can get a turn that day? Some historians argue that any senator, even a junior one, technically had the right to speak if called upon, but the social pressure to defer to elders was so crushing that they effectively censored themselves. Others argue that there was a strict property qualification or a specific magisterial rank barrier that legally silenced them. The debate is about the nature of Roman liberty. Was the Senate a place of free speech for all members, or was an oligarchy where the bottom 70% were just glorified wallpaper? You watch the footmen shift their weight again. Being a Padarius does have one massive advantage, though one that you, from your slightly higher perch, are beginning to envy. Safety. In Rome, speaking is dangerous. A speech recorded by a scribe can be used against you 10 years later. A witty insult thrown at a consul can result in you being assigned to govern a province that is mostly swamp and mosquitoes. But the men in the back? They are invisible. No one writes down whose side they walked during a minor vote on sewer maintenance. They can survive purges, civil wars, and dictatorships simply because nobody remembers their names. They are the cockroaches of the Republic. Uncrushable because they are beneath notice. The consul is still talking. He's been talking for an hour. You see a Padarius in the back row stifle, a yawn so massive his jaw cracks. Another one is surreptitiously picking at a loose thread on his toga. Another seems to be staring intently at a crack in the ceiling, perhaps contemplating the structural integrity of the Republic, or perhaps just wondering what's for dinner. This is their life. They are the audience for a play they paid to be in, but they aren't allowed on stage. You feel a twinge of sympathy, but it passes quickly. You worked hard to get off that back bench. You survive the elections, you bribe the right people, you sponsor the right games. You have earned the right to sit 5 rows close to the front. You look back at them one last time, a sea of white wool and bored faces, waiting for command to stand up and walk. The quiet struggle of the back row is the struggle against irrelevance. They are waiting for the moment of the decessio, the great division, when they can finally stretch their legs and prove, by the simple act of walking across a room, that they exist. Until then, they are just a silent weight that keeps the ship of state steady, sitting in the shadows while the captains argue over the wheel. The silent, terrified men in the back row are still frozen in their Padarii paralysis, but at the front of the room, the dynamic is entirely different. The presiding consul has finished his opening remarks and has now turned to the most dangerous man in the room, the Princeps Senatus. This title, meaning first man of the Senate, isn't just a fancy label, it's a weapon. He is usually the oldest, most decorated, and most stubborn ex-censor in the Republic. He stands up slowly, his joints audibly cracking in the silence, adjusting his toga with a practiced, theatrical slowness. He looks around the room, locking eyes with the junior senators, daring them to look bored, and then he begins to speak. You settle into your hard wooden bench, bracing yourself. You have entered the quiet struggle of the monologue. In the modern world, we have time limits. We have buzzers. We have the wrap-it-up music at award shows. In the Roman Senate, you have none of that. You have a man who remembers the Punic Wars personally and has decided that the current price of olive oil in Sicily is the perfect jumping-off point for a 3-hour lecture on the moral decay of a youth. You watch him gesture, his voice starting as a gravelly rumble and rising to a thundering roar. He isn't just talking. He is performing the role of the wise elder, and the script for that role apparently involves never, ever shutting up. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that governs your suffering: the concept of auctoritas. This is one of those untranslatable Roman words that historians love. It doesn't mean power, that's potestas, or command, that's imperium. Auctoritas is clout. It's the weight of your reputation. The reason everyone is sitting here listening to this man drone on about grain weevils is that he possesses more auctoritas than anyone else. In Rome, you don't listen to a speech because it's good. You listen because of who is giving it. If a junior senator gave this exact same speech, he would be booed off the floor. But because this man once triumphed over a barbarian king 40 years ago, his boredom is considered wisdom. You are essentially being held hostage by his resume. You watch his hands. They are moving in hypnotic, specific patterns. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of night: the science of chironomia. Roman oratory wasn't just about words. It was about hand law. There were manuals written on exactly how to hold your fingers to convey specific emotions, to express instruction. You might touch your thumb to your middle finger while extending the others. To express horror, you might spread your fingers wide and strike your thigh. But the most important rule was a restriction on the upper arm. A dignified Roman senator was never supposed to lift his elbow above his shoulder while speaking. Why? Because waving your arms around like a windmill was considered Greek and effeminate. A true Roman kept his gestures contained, tight, and close to the chest, creating a peculiar style of arguing that looked like a man trying to fight his way out of a telephone booth. You watch the Princeps Senatus violate this rule slightly as he gets worked up about the olive oil, his elbow creeping dangerously high. The Senate notices. A ripple of judgment passes through the room. It's the ancient equivalent of a politician sweating too much during a debate. As the first hour of his speech bleeds into the second, you find your mind drifting. You start counting the coffered beams in the ceiling. You study the mosaic floor, trying to find a tile that's out of place. You look at the sunbeam entering through the high windows. When the speech started, the light was hitting the foot of the Statue of Victory. Now, it has crawled across the floor and is illuminating the sandal of a sleeping praetor. You realize that the sun is the only thing in this room making any actual progress. The speaker has now utilized a rhetorical device known as egressio, the digression. He has seamlessly pivoted from olive oil to the state of the aqueducts, and from there to a personal anecdote about a rude waiter he met in Naples. This is legal. In the Roman Senate, when you are asked for your opinion, asterisk intentium dicere asterisk, you are legally allowed to talk about anything you want, for as long as you want, provided you eventually loop back to the topic at hand. It is a loophole the size of the Colosseum. You watch him take a sip of water, and your heart sinks. Hydration means he's recharging. He's barely halfway done. Now, as you suppress a sigh that could be interpreted as treason, we reach a point of academic friction that keeps literary historians debating in their libraries. The Cicero illusion. We read the speeches of Cicero or Cato today, and they are brilliant, tight, literary masterpieces of logic and wit. Because of this, we assume the Roman Senate was a place of dazzling intellectual debate. However, a significant group of modern scholars argues that what we read today are the polished studio versions. They suggest that the actual speeches given on the floor were likely rambling, repetitive, disjointed, and full of stumbling improvisation. The debate is, are we reading the transcript, or are we reading the movie script that was written 6 months later to make the hero look smarter? You listen to the old man stumble over a verb and repeat the same point for the third time, and you fall firmly into the, it was probably a mess camp. The physical toll of listening is becoming real. Your back aches from the lack of support. Your legs are cramping from being tucked under the bench. But the worst part is the quiet struggle of the bladder. There are no scheduled breaks. If you get up to leave, you are disrespecting the speaker. You are signaling that your bodily functions are more important than his auctoritas. So you sit, You endure. You dehydrate yourself strategically. You realize that the true qualification for being a Roman senator isn't military skill or legal knowledge. It is a possession of an iron bladder and the ability to sleep with your eyes open. Finally, the Princeps Senatus seems to be winding down. He has circled back to the olive oil. He is summarizing his points. He strikes his thigh for emphasis one last time, a perfect Chironomia move. He sits down. A polite, muffled ripple of applause moves through the benches. Not because the speech was good, but because it is over. You feel a surge of hope. Maybe now the debate will open up. Maybe now they will call on someone younger, someone with fresh ideas, perhaps even you? But then, the consul calls the next name. It is another ex-consul, a man who is famous for his 3-volume treatise on the proper care of mules. He stands up. He clears his throat. He pulls a scroll out of his toga that looks thick enough to beat a gladiator to death with. Your hope evaporates like mist in the Roman sun. You realize that seniority is just a license to hold the room hostage. You settle back against the hardwood, the sunbeam moving another inch across the floor. You are trapped in the amber of Roman tradition, waiting your turn for an eternity that feels like it will never come. The quiet struggle of the listener is the hardest battle of all, because you have to fight it in absolute silence while looking like you're fascinated by mules. The senior ex-consul with the treatise on mules has finally sat down, looking very pleased with himself. A collective sigh of relief ripples through the chamber, audible even over the buzzing of flies near the open windows. The sun has moved significantly across the sky. The sharp beams of morning light have softened into the golden, hazy glow of late afternoon. You shift your legs, trying to get the blood flowing again. You check your internal clock, your stomach, and estimate that there are perhaps 2 hours of daylight left. The presiding consul, likely Julius Caesar or one of his allies, looks eager. He senses the finish line. He wants to call the vote on a controversial land bill that has been hovering over the session like a storm cloud all day. He stands up, ready to initiate the decessio, the physical division of the House that counts as voting. But before he can utter the words, a figure rises from a bench near the front. It is Marcus Porcius Cato. Cato the Younger, a groan, low and guttural, rises from the opposition benches. You sink lower into your toga. You know exactly what is about to happen. You are about to witness the weaponization of time itself. You are about to see the birth of the filibuster. Cato does not look like the other senators. While you and your colleagues are draped in fine, bleached white wool, Cato makes a point of wearing a dark, rough toga without a tunic underneath, in the style of the ancient, austere Romans. He looks like a statue that has walked off its pedestal to scold you for enjoying your life. He doesn't smooth his hair. He doesn't wear perfume. He stands there, rigid and unyielding, a monolith of moral superiority. He demands a right to speak. And because he is a praetorian, an ex-praetor, and a man of immense auctoritas, the consul cannot legally deny him. The consul gestures wearily, and Cato begins. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that dictates the rules of this excruciating game. Sola casus. The Roman Senate had a strict curfew. By law, all business had to conclude before sunset. The Senate could not meet at night. This wasn't just a labor law. It was a religious one. Decisions made in the dark were considered suspect, prone to conspiracy and bad omens. This rule created a hard deadline. If a vote didn't happen by the time the sun dipped below the Capitoline Hill, the motion died. It was a use it or lose it system for legislation. And Cato knew this better than anyone. His strategy was simple. He didn't need to win the argument. He just needed to run out the clock. You settle in for the siege. Cato starts speaking about the land bill. He dissects the first clause. He analyzes the grammar of the second clause. He questions the font size of the third clause. Then, utilizing the aggressio loophole we talked about earlier, he pivots. He begins to talk about the moral virtues of agriculture. Then, he talks about the history of land ownership in Italy since the time of Romulus. Then he talks about the importance of respecting one's ancestors. Then he lists his ancestors. Then he lists your ancestors. He is talking in a steady, monotonous drone that is designed not to persuade, but to erode the will to live. You watch the consul's face turn a shade of purple that matches the border of his toga. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night: the arrest of the mouth. In 59 BC, during one of these legendary filibusters, Julius Caesar, who was consul at the time, finally snapped. He didn't just shout. He ordered his lictors, the bodyguard with the axes, to arrest Cato right there on the Senate floor and drag him to prison. It was a shocking breach of protocol. A senator's body was supposed to be inviolable during a session, but Cato didn't fight back. He didn't stop talking, either. As the lictors grabbed his arms, Cato continued his speech, loudly declaiming against tyranny while being physically dragged toward the door. And then, something extraordinary happened. The quiet struggle of the room shifted. You watch as the entire Senate, even the men who hated Cato, even the men who supported Caesar's bill, stood up. They began to follow Cato out the door. When Caesar asked where they were going, one senator famously replied, "I would rather be in prison with Cato than in the Senate with you." It was the ultimate passive-aggressive walkout. Caesar, realizing the optics of arresting half the government were terrible, had to order Cato's release. Cato walked back in, brushed off his rough toga, took his spot, and continued speaking exactly where he left off. You have to admire the sheer, stubborn commitment to being annoying. The sunbeam on the floor is your hourglass. You watch it crawl up the wall, inch by agonizing inch. The room is getting darker. The shadows are stretching out, turning the statues of the gods into looming silhouettes. Cato is now talking about the proper way to harvest cabbage. You are hungry. Your bladder is full. You have a headache from the stale air. But you can't leave. If you leave, the quorum might be lost, or worse, you might miss the moment the sun finally sets and the session collapses. You are a prisoner of one man's lung capacity. The struggle here is the struggle against the biological clock versus the astronomical clock. You look around at your colleagues. Some have genuinely fallen asleep, their heads lolling back against the wall, mouths open. A few of the Padarii in the back are playing a game of knucklebones on the floor, hidden by the sea of togas. The scribes near the front are rubbing their cramping hands, looking at Cato with undisguised hatred. They have to write all of this down. Every word about the cabbage. Every philosophical musing on the nature of virtue. Cato is generating a mountain of paperwork that no one will ever read, purely as a tactical blockade. Now, as the twilight begins to turn the windows a deep blue, we reach a point of academic friction that keeps political theorists arguing in their seminars. Obstruction versus principle debate. For centuries, Cato was viewed as a hero of the Republic, the last man standing against the tyranny of dictators like Caesar. He used the rules of the system to save the system. However, a significant group of modern historians argues that Cato's tactics actually destroyed the Republic. They suggest that by refusing to compromise, by filibustering every single reform and paralyzing the government for years, he made the system unworkable. He proved that the Senate was broken. By blocking legal avenues for change, he forced ambitious men like Caesar to use illegal ones, like marching an army across the Rubicon. The debate is, was Cato the shield of liberty, or was he the sand in the gears that caused the engine to explode? You watch the final sliver of sun disappear from the windowsill. A herald steps into the doorway and announces, "Asterisk sola casus est asterisk." The sun has set. The magic words. Cato stops mid-sentence. He doesn't finish his thought. He doesn't summarize. He simply closes his mouth, sits down, and looks smug. The consul slams his hand against his ivory chair in frustration. The session is over. The bill is dead for the day. No vote can be taken. The tension in the room instantly breaks, replaced by the chaotic noise of 300 men trying to leave at once. You stand up, your legs stiff and numb. You wrap your toga tighter around you against the evening chill. You have accomplished absolutely nothing today. You sat on a wooden bench for 10 hours, listened to a lecture on cabbage, and watched the sun move across the floor. And yet, this is considered a victory for the Constitution. You shuffle toward the door, joining the stream of white wool pouring out into the darkened forum. The strepitus of the city has changed. The workday noise is gone, replaced by the dangerous silence of the Roman night. You are exhausted, hungry, and cynical. But as you look back at the Curia, sitting dark and silent against the stars, You realize that you will be back tomorrow to do it all again. Because in Rome, talking until the sun goes down isn't just a waste of time. It's the only way to stop the world from changing too fast. The sun is finally set, taking Cato and his endless droning about cabbage with it. You might think this means the quiet struggle is over, and you can go home, kick off your sandals, and enjoy a nice cup of wine. You would be wrong. In the Roman Senate, the end of the official session is merely the starting gun for the unofficial one. As you shuffle out of the Curia Hostilia, the air in the forum has changed. The shouting merchants are packing up, but the political animals are just waking up. You are stepping out of the frying pan and into the fire corona, the ring. You step onto comitium steps and are immediately hit by a wall of noise. This isn't a general roar of Rome anymore. This is specific, directed aggression. A crowd is gathered outside the Senate doors. These aren't just random passers-by. They're the political partisans, the hired muscle, and the deeply opinionated citizens who have spent the last 6 hours standing in the sun, listening to every word of the debate through the open doors. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that changes how you view ancient politics. The Senate was not a private club. The doors of the Curia were almost always left open during sessions. The crowd outside the Corona could hear the speeches, cheer for their favorites, and boo their enemies. You weren't just debating your colleagues. You were performing for a live, often hostile, studio audience that was standing 10 feet away, armed with rotten vegetables and very strong opinions. You tighten your toga around you, feeling exposed. You have to walk through this gauntlet to get home. A group of men wearing the rough tunics of the collegia, guilds, starts shouting at the senator walking in front of you. They are angry about the land bill Cato just killed. Give us the land. They scream, their voices raw and threatening. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of night. The art of polite heckling. While the mob could be dangerous, there was also a formalized language of abuse. Senators and the crowd would engage in a call and response of insults that was almost theatrical. You might hear shouts of thief, adulterer, or the classic glutton thrown at a respected ex-consul. It wasn't just noise, it was a feedback loop. If the Corona booed you loud enough, it could actually shake your octoritas inside the chamber. You realize that the walls of the Senate are porous. The mob is the fourth branch of government, and right now, they are voting with their lungs. You navigate the crowd, flanked by your lictors who use their fasces, bundles of rods, to gently but firmly shove people out of your way. You keep your head down, avoiding eye contact. You don't want to become the main character of tonight's riot. You finally break through the ring of people and reach the relative safety of the Via Sacra. Your heart is pounding. You realize that the physical danger of the forum is just as exhausting as the mental danger of the debate, but you can't go home yet. You have to engage in the quiet struggle of the after-party. You spot a small group of colleagues gathering near the Temple of Saturn. They are the backroom boys, the men who actually make the decisions while everyone else is listening to speeches. You wander over. They are speaking in hushed tones, their heads bent together. This is where the real work happens. The Senate floor is for theater. The porticos are for deals. Did you see Caesar's face when Cato started listing his ancestors? One of them whispers, chuckling. He looked like he was going to order the legion to march right then and there. Another replies. You nod, adding a non-committal grunt of agreement. You are playing the game. You are signaling that you are part of the inner circle, even if you spend the last 4 hours thinking about dinner. This brings us to a point of academic friction that keeps political scientists arguing in their think tanks. The transparency versus secrecy debate. We know the Senate doors were open, suggesting transparency. But we also know that the most critical decisions, the alliances, the bribes, the marriage pacts, were made in these informal, whisper huddles where no scribe could hear. Was a Roman Republic a democracy of the forum, or was an oligarchy of the shadows? As you listen to a senior praetor casually suggest bribing a tribune to veto Cato tomorrow, you suspect the shadows are winning. The conversation shifts to the Sena. The dinner party's happening tonight. Invitations are being traded like currency. Are you dining with Lucullus? Someone asks. I heard he's serving thrushes fattened on figs. You haven't been invited. A pang of social anxiety hits you harder than the hunger. In Rome, If you aren't at the right dinner table, you might as well be in exile. The quiet struggle isn't just about laws. It's about relevance. You force a smile and lie. No, I have pressing family business tonight. They nod, knowing you're lying, knowing you know they know. It's a dance of polite exclusion. You finally excuse yourself, claiming exhaustion. You walk away from the group, their laughter fading into the background. The sun has fully set now. The forum is turning into a landscape of deep shadows and torchlight. You pass the rostra, the speaking platform where politicians address the people. It stands empty now, a silent monument to the power of words. You think about the mob, the shouting, the open doors. You realize that in Rome, privacy is the ultimate luxury, and you, a public man, have none. You begin to climb back up the Palatine Hill. The noise of the city is changing again. The carts are coming out. The night shift of Rome is waking up. You are leaving the arena of the Corona, but the ringing in your ears from the shouting crowd will follow you all the way to your front door. You wrap your toga tight against the evening chill, feeling the weight of the wool and the weight of the public gaze. You survive the Senate floor, you survive the mob outside, and you survive the social snubbing of the portico. You're going home, but you know that even in your own bed, you will be drafting tomorrow's rebuttals in your head. The debate never truly ends. It just moves locations. The sun has risen again over the Palatine. The roosters have finished their morning screaming match, and you are back on your hard wooden bench in the Curia Hostilia. The stiffness in your lower back hasn't gone away. In fact, it's now a familiar dull companion, like a nagging relative. But today, the quiet struggle isn't about the physical discomfort of the furniture or the endless droning of Cato. It is about the terrifying lack of privacy. You are sitting in the heart of the most powerful government on earth, discussing matters of national security, war plans, tax riots, the suppression of slave revolts, and yet you might as well be having this conversation in the middle of a crowded marketplace. You look toward the massive bronze doors at the front of the chamber. They're wide open. They're always wide open. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that fundamentally changes how we imagine Roman politics. The Senate was not a bunker. In modern governments, high-level deliberations happen in soundproof situation rooms or behind closed doors with top-secret stamps on every folder. In the Roman Republic, transparency wasn't a policy. It was architecture. The Curia stood directly on the edge of the Comitium, the public assembly space. The doors were left open specifically so the people, the populus Romanus, could see their leaders at work. It was a symbolic gesture that said, "We have nothing to hide, even though you absolutely have things to hide." From your seat on the bench, you can see them, the corona, the ring. It is a dense, shifting wall of humanity pressing against the invisible barrier of the doorway. These are the citizens of Rome, shopkeepers, artisans, idlers, and political operatives. They are close enough that you can smell the garlic on their breath when the wind changes. They are close enough to make eye contact. And most terrifyingly, they are listening. You watch a colleague of yours, a nervous ex-praetor, stand up to give a speech about reducing the grain dole to save money. It is a sensible fiscal argument. Inside the room, heads are nodding. But then, he says the phrase budget cuts. A low, menacing growl rises from the open doors. It starts as a murmur and swells into a roar of booing and hissing. The senator freezes. He looks at the consul. He looks at the door. He knows that if he continues this line of thought, he won't just lose a vote. He might get a rock thrown at his head when he leaves. He stammers, wipes sweat from his forehead, and suddenly pivots, softening his stance. The quiet struggle. Here is the struggle to legislate with a gun to your head. You realize that the Senate chamber is essentially a stage, and the audience has the power to cancel the show at any moment. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night: the senator's spy. Because the doors were open, secrecy was impossible. But in 59 BC, Julius Caesar took this leakiness and weaponized it into an institution. He created the Acta Diurna, literally the Daily Acts. It was the world's first newspaper. Before this, Senate proceedings were technically recorded but kept private in the archives. Caesar ordered that a summary of every debate, every vote, and every speech be written down on whiteboards and posted publicly in the forum every single day. He did this to embarrass his enemies. Imagine if every dumb thing you said in a meeting was transcribed and pasted on a billboard outside your office. You watch the scribes near the door, scratching furiously on their wax tablets. They aren't just taking minutes. They are creating content for tomorrow's gossip. You have to constantly self-censor, knowing that your words will be read by the baker, the tanner, and the soldier before the sun sets. The pressure of the open door changes the acoustics of the room. You aren't speaking to your colleagues. You are speaking through them to the mob outside. You see a popular tribune of the plebs stand up. He turns his back on the Senate, a shocking breach of etiquette, and shouts his speech toward the open doors. He is performing the corona. He waves his arms. He uses popular slogans. He works the crowd into a frenzy. The cheers from outside echo off the stone walls, drowning out the grumbles of the aristocrats inside. The Senate House has become an echo chamber where the outside world amplifies the chaos within. Now, as you watch the Tribune high-five the air while the crowd chants his name, we reach a point of academic friction that keeps political scientists arguing in their lecture halls. The democracy versus oligarchy debate. For centuries, historians viewed the Roman Republic as a strict oligarchy, where a few rich families ran everything and the people had no say. However, a significant group of modern scholars, led famously by Fergus Miller, argues that the crowd factor made Rome far more democratic than we think. They argue that because the Senate debates were public, and because the people could physically intimidate or cheer their leaders in real time, the will of the people was a constant, tangible force that shaped legislation. Was the Senate the brain of Rome, or was it just a puppet dancing on the strings of the mob outside? As you watch a senior consul nervously adjust his speech to avoid angering the crowd, you start to feel like the puppet theory has some merit. The quiet struggle is also about focus. It is incredibly hard to concentrate on the nuances of a treaty with the Parthian Empire when a fishmonger outside is screaming about the price of mackerel. The noise of the forum bleeds into the sanctity of the state. You hear dogs barking, children crying, and the clang, clang, clang of a nearby construction project. You have to develop a selective deafness. You have to tune out the reality of Rome to govern Rome. It's a mental discipline that leaves you exhausted. You see men on the benches closing their eyes, not to sleep, but to build a mental wall against the chaos. And then there are the eavesdroppers. You spot a man leaning against the doorframe, taking notes on a small tablet. He isn't a scribe. He isn't a senator. He is an agent for a tax farming corporation, or perhaps a spy for a foreign king. In a world with open doors, industrial espionage is easy. You realize that the financial markets in the forum are reacting to your debate in real time. If the Senate looks like it's going to war, the price of copper spikes before you've even finished voting. You are living in a glass house. You shift on your bench, feeling the draft from the open door. It's a cold wind today, carrying the dust of the city. You wrap your toga tighter. You envy the kings of the East, who rule from behind golden curtains and silence. Here, power is messy. It's loud. It's public. You look at the consul, who is trying to regain control of the room over the chants of the crowd. He looks tired. You are tired. You realize that the quiet struggle isn't just about making laws. It's about maintaining the illusion of authority when everyone can see you sweating. The sun moves across the floor, casting the shadow of the doorframe over your feet. The corona shifts and changes as the day goes on. The morning crowd of clients gives way to the afternoon crowd of idlers and troublemakers. But they never leave. They are the constant, breathing reminder that you serve at their pleasure, or at least at the pleasure of their potential riot. You look at the open door one last time. It's not just an exit, it's a mouth, and it is always hungry for news, for scandal, and for the drama of your life. You turn your attention back to the speaker, trying to ignore the thousand eyes burning into the back of your neck. You are a Roman senator, and you have no secrets. The sun has passed its zenith, and the shadow of the rostra is beginning to lengthen across the forum pavement. Inside the Curia, the debate on tax farming in Asia Minor has reached a stalemate. The consul looks bored. You are bored. The quiet struggle of the afternoon is simply trying to stay awake, while a man from a minor family drones on about the price of lentils. You turn your gaze once again to the open doors, but this time you aren't looking at the Roman mob. You are looking just to the right of the Comitium, to a specific, raised platform known as the Greco-Stasis. Standing there, baking in the relentless Italian heat, is a man wearing a purple cloak and a golden diadem. He is flanked by servants holding parasols and chests of gifts. He is a king. He rules a territory in the east that is older than Rome itself. He commands armies, he has a harem, and his subjects worship him as a living god. But here, he is just another guy in the waiting room. He has been standing there for 3 weeks. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that perfectly encapsulates the Roman worldview, the Greco-Stasis. Rome was so arrogant that they built a specific holding pen for foreign ambassadors in the middle of their city, but they deliberately built it outside the Senate House. No foreigner, not even a king, was allowed inside the Curia unless explicitly invited. They had to wait on this platform, exposed to the elements and the jeers of the Roman public, until the Senate deigned to hear them. It was a calculated architectural insult. It said, "You may be a big deal in Cappadocia, but in Rome, you are just a tourist with grievance." You watch the king shift his weight from one foot to the other. He looks miserable. His heavy, embroidered robes are not designed for a Roman summer. He is likely here to beg for military aid against a neighbor, or perhaps to ask the Senate to recognize his son as a legitimate heir. He is a client king, a glorious title that essentially means he is your middle manager. You catch his eye. He sees your senatorial stripe and immediately bows his head in deference. You give him a slight, barely perceptible nod. It feels good. It feels terrifyingly good. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night: the performance of misery. Foreign kings quickly learned that the Roman Senate didn't respond to pride. They responded to pity. So, monarchies developed a strange theater of humiliation. King Pyrrhus II of Bithynia, when he came to visit, didn't just bow. He shaved his head, wore the ruffled cap of a liberated slave, Appius, and prostrated himself on the threshold of the Senate, crying out, "Greetings, save your gods," to the seated senators. He literally role-played as their freed slave. The Senate loved it. They gave him everything he wanted. You realize that the man on the Greco-Stasis is probably rehearsing his own degradation right now, figuring out exactly how much he needs to grovel to get a legion sent to his border. The sheer power dynamic is intoxicating. You are sitting on a hard wooden bench, wearing an itchy wool blanket, worrying about your debts. He is dripping in gold. Yet, you could snap your fingers and have him deposed. You could declare his kingdom a province and auction off his palace furniture to pay for a new aqueduct. The quiet struggle for him is a struggle to survive your whims. For you, it's the struggle to care. You have the power of life and death over nations you couldn't locate on a map, and honestly, you're mostly just wishing he'd brought some better snacks. Now, as you watch the king sort of fly away from his royal nose, we reach a point of academic friction that keeps international relations theorists arguing in their think tanks. The empire by invitation debate. For a long time, historians viewed Rome as a ravenous, aggressive predator that marched out to conquer the world because it was bloodthirsty. But a significant group of modern scholars, led by Eckstein and others, argues for defensive imperialism or empire by invitation. They suggest that Rome didn't want to conquer the East. They argue that these kings, like the guys sweating on the platform, kept coming to Rome, begging for intervention, dragging Rome into their petty squabbles. Rome became an empire not because it marched out, but because the world wouldn't stop knocking on its door. The debate is, was Rome a wolf-eating sheep, or was a reluctant policeman dragged onto beat by the neighbors? You watch a scribe walk out to the Greco-Stasis and whisper something to the king. The king's face falls. He has been bumped from the schedule again. The Senate has decided to discuss the drain in the Cloaca Maxima instead of his war. He bows again, accepting the snub. He will be back tomorrow. He has no choice. There's a dark humor in it. You remember the story of Popilius Laenas, a Roman envoy sent to stop the powerful king Antiochus IV from invading Egypt. Popilius didn't have an army. He just had a stick. He drew a circle in the sand around the king and told him, "Before you step out of this circle, give me your answer. Peace or war with Rome?" The king, terrified of the abstraction that is Rome, surrendered immediately. That is the power you hold. It isn't just military. It is psychological. You are part of a collective entity, Astris Senatus Populusque Romanus Astris, that has convinced the world it is invincible. But there is a trap in this arrogance. You look at the king again. He is humiliated, yes, but he is also resentful. Every time you make a monarch wait in the sun, you create a generational grudge. You wonder briefly if this empire by invitation is actually an empire of traps. By solving everyone's problems, you've made everyone's problems your own. If that king falls, you have to fix it. If he is attacked, you have to defend him. You are knitting yourself into a web of obligations that stretches from the Thames to the Nile. You are the master of the world, but you are also its servant. The consul finally bangs his hand on the armrest. "Let us hear the envoy from Pontus," he announces, having apparently run out of sewer topics. The king perks up. He straightens his diadem. He signals to his slaves to pick up the chest of gold. He prepares to enter the lion's den. You sit up straighter on your bench. You arrange your toga to look as majestic as possible. You are about to receive a king. You will listen to him. You will judge him. And you will probably interrupt him to ask about the exotic dancing girls he brought. The quiet struggle of diplomacy is the struggle to maintain the mask of omnipotence. You cannot show weakness. You cannot show doubt. When that king walks through the doors, he must see 300 gods sitting in judgment. You lock your face into a mask of bored gravitas. You are ready. The king crosses the threshold, the gold of his robes flashing in the sunlight. And for a moment, the Curia feels less like a government building and more like a theater where the play is always about you. The foreign king has finally been dismissed, dragging his heavy robes and his resentment back out to the Greco-stasis. The doors of the Curia remain open, but the theatrical pageantry of diplomacy has evaporated. In its place, the Senate returns to its favorite pastime, a screaming match between two rival families about a zoning law that was passed 40 years ago. The air is thick with accusations. The consul is shouting. The tribune of the plebs is shouting back. And amidst this cacophony of aristocratic rage, you notice a frantic, rhythmic scratching sound coming from the foot of the podium. You look down. Sitting on low stools or cross-legged on the floor, almost invisible beneath the folds of the magistrates' togas, are the scribes. They are the human tape recorders of the Roman Republic. While you and your colleagues are fighting for the soul of Rome, these men are fighting a much more immediate battle. The battle against the speed of sound. You watch one of them, a young enslaved man with ink-stained fingers, desperately trying to keep up with a senator who speaks at the speed of a runaway chariot. His hand is a blur. He isn't writing words. He is carving symbols. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that revolutionized the bureaucracy of the ancient world: the invention of shorthand. Specifically, Noti Tyroniani, Tyronian notes. This system was invented by Marcus Tullius Tiro, the brilliant slave and later freedman of Cicero. Tiro realized that Latin, with its endless declensions and long, pompous sentences, was simply too slow to capture the lightning-fast wit of his master. So, he deconstructed the language. He created a system of abstract symbols, abbreviations, and marks that could represent common words like republic, glory, or consul with a single stroke of the stylus. You watch the scribe's hand fly across the wax tablet. He is literally encoding the debate in real time. It looks like magic. Where a normal man would write Senatus Populusque Romanus, he carves a simple, jagged squiggle. He is compressing the bombast of the Senate into a stream of data. This system was so effective that it would survive the fall of Rome, be used by medieval monks, and influence shorthand systems right up to the 19th century. You are witnessing the birth of the .zip file, performed manually on a wooden board. The quiet struggle of the scribe is one of intense, terrifying focus. If he misses a sentence, he can't ask the consul to please rewind. If he misquotes a powerful praetor, he could be flogged, or worse, sold to work in the mines. You see the sweat dripping from the scribe's nose onto the wax. His forearm muscles are corded with tension. He is in a state of hyper-awareness, filtering out the jeers of the crowd and the barking of dogs to isolate the voice of the speaker. He is the filter through which history will be remembered. But the tool he is using is just as interesting as the language. He holds a stylus, a slender instrument made of iron or bronze. One end is sharp, used for cutting the letters into the beeswax surface of tablet. The other end is flat and wide, like a spatula. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night. The eraser was also a weapon. To erase a mistake, you use the flat end of the stylus to smooth the wax back over, literally ironing out the error. This is where we get the Latin phrase stylum vertere, to turn the stylus, which meant to edit or retract your words. But in a pinch, that sharp iron point was dangerous. There are accounts of senators and scribes using their styluses to stab opponents during riots. Julius Caesar, when surrounded by his assassins, reportedly stabbed Casca in the arm with his stylus in a final, desperate act of defense. The scribe isn't just holding a pen, he is holding a shiv. You watch the scribe turn the stylus. Frantically, as a senator, he is recording, suddenly changes his mind mid-sentence. No, strike that. I did not say the tax was illegal. I said it was imprudent. The scribe flattens the wax in panic, smoothing over the treasonous error before the ink of history can dry. It is a messy, physical process of revision. The wax shavings pile up on his lap like snow. Now, as you watch a fresh tablet being passed to the scribe by an assistant, we reach a point of academic friction that keeps textual critics arguing in their seminars. The verbatim versus fiction debate. For centuries, we assumed that the speeches recorded in Roman histories, the soaring oratory of Cicero, the battlefield speeches of Caesar, were accurate transcripts. After all, the scribes were right there. However, a significant group of modern scholars argues that the Actus Senatus, the official record, was heavily edited. They suggest that the scribes didn't just record. They cleaned up, they removed the stammers, the grammatical errors, and the incoherent rambling. They turned the messy, chaotic reality of the Senate into polished, literary prose. The debate is, are we reading what the Romans actually said, or are we reading the Instagram-filtered version that makes everyone sound smarter than they actually were? You look at the senator currently speaking. He is a man known for his lisp and his tendency to lose his train of thought. He is currently arguing about an aqueduct repair contract, but he has somehow ended up talking about his grandmother's figs. You look at the scribe. The scribe is not writing down the figs. He is waiting, his stylus hovering, filtering out the nonsense to capture only the relevant legal points. You realize that the scribes are the editors of reality. They are deciding in real time what deserves to be immortalized and what deserves to be smoothed over with the flat end of the iron. The physical toll on these men is immense. You, at least, can shift on your bench. You can stretch your legs. The scribe must remain hunched over, his spine curved like a question mark, for hours on end. You see one scribe shake his hand, try to work out a cramp. He switches the stylus to his left hand for a moment, a dazzling display of ambidexterity, before switching back. He is a machine made of meat and bone, driven by the fear of his master. As the debate rages on, the pile of filled wax tablets grows. They are stacked on the floor like bricks. These are the raw materials of the Roman Empire. They contain the laws, the treaties, the declarations of war, and the petty insults of powerful men. Eventually, these notes will be transcribed onto papyrus scrolls and filed in the tabularium, the great archive overlooking the forum. But for now, they are just fragile scratches in soft wax. If someone were to leave them in the sun too long, the history of the Republic would literally melt away. You feel a strange kinship with the scribe. You are both trapped in this room, bound by duty and custom. You are the actor, he is the camera. You perform the power, he captures it. Without him, your octoritas evaporates the moment you stop speaking. You catch the scribe's eye for a fleeting second. He looks exhausted, his eyes rimmed with red dust. He quickly looks down, returning to his work. He knows his place. He is the invisible man who makes you visible to the future. The consul finally calls for a short recess to consult the auspices again. The chickens are apparently restless. The scribes slump forward, dropping their styluses. They massage their hands, drink water from cheap clay cups, and whisper among themselves in their own coded language. You realize that they probably know more secrets than anyone in this room. They know who stuttered, who lied, and who whispered a bribe to his neighbor. But they will never tell. Their silence is part of the code. You lean back, watching the dust motes dance in the shaft of light that illuminates the pile of tablets. The quiet struggle of the scribe is a struggle against oblivion. He fights to catch the wind of words before it blows away, pinning it down with iron and wax. And as the session resumes and the shouting begins again, the scratch, scratch, scratch of the stylus returns. The steady, rhythmic heartbeat of a bureaucracy that refuses to forget. The frantic scratching of the scribes has become a background hum, a white noise that you barely notice anymore. The air in the curia has grown heavy and still, the kind of stillness that precedes a thunderstorm. A new figure has taken the floor near the center of the room. He isn't shouting like the tribune of the plebs. He isn't droning like Cato. He stands perfectly still, waiting for the rustling of togas to cease. He is a novice homo, a new man, someone who didn't inherit a seat, but earned it to the sheer, terrifying power of his tongue. He begins to speak, and suddenly, the quiet struggle of boredom vanishes, replaced by the quiet struggle of resisting a spell. You find yourself leaning forward. He is talking about the grain supply in Sicily, a topic that, by all rights, should be putting you to sleep. But the way he talks about it doesn't sound like logistics. It sounds like an epic poem. He describes the golden fields, the corrupt governors, the starving children in the Subura. His voice rises and falls in a musical scale that tugs at your chest. You feel a strange physical reaction. Your breathing starts to sync with his sentences. You are being hypnotized by the most dangerous weapon in the Roman arsenal, rhetoric. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that explains why you are currently captivated by a lecture on wheat. For a Roman senator, public speaking was not a soft skill. It was a martial art. From the age of 7, Roman boys were drilled in the art of rhetoric. They spent years practicing sui sori, persuasive speeches for historical figures, and controversy, complex legal defenses. They learned how to modulate their pitch, how to use pauses, and how to construct a sentence that hit the ear like a hammer. A Roman senator might be a terrible general and a worse administrator, but if he could speak well, he could rule the world. You are watching a man who has spent 40 years training for this exact moment of performance. You watch his throat muscles work. He isn't just saying words. He is singing them. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night: the secret rhythm of clausulae. Roman oratory was deeply musical. The end of every sentence was structured according to a strict rhythmic pattern of long and short syllables, known as clausulae. These patterns were designed to trigger a subconscious response in the audience, much like the drop in a modern song. The most famous one was the Cretic trochee, long, short, long, long, short. When a speaker nailed this rhythm at the end of a passionate paragraph, the audience would often burst into spontaneous applause before they even processed the meaning of the words. You realize that you are tapping your finger on your knee in time with his speech. He is literally hacking your brain with poetry. The speaker's voice drops to a whisper. The entire Senate leans in. He is telling a story about a widow who was cheated by a tax collector. It is almost certainly made up, or at least heavily embellished, but you feel tears pricking your eyes. You look around. The garlic-eating senator next to you is weeping openly into a fold of his toga. The scribes have stopped writing to listen. The man has turned the Senate House into a theater of pure emotion. He waves his arm, carefully keeping the elbow low, of course, and points an accusing finger at the opposition bench. The silence that follows is louder than any shout. Now, as you wipe a traitorous tear from your eye, we reach a point of academic friction that keeps literary scholars arguing in their ivory towers. The Asianism versus Atticism debate. In the 1st century BC, there was a fierce culture war over how a Roman should speak. On one side were the Asianists, like Hortensius, and to some extent Cicero in his early years, who favor flowery, emotional, rhythmic, and highly ornamental style, the style you are hearing right now. On the other side were the Atticists, like Julius Caesar and Brutus, who believed in a plain, direct, unadorned style that focused on logic and facts. The debate was, is the purpose of a speech to move the emotions Asianism or to instruct the mind Atticism? Did the Republic fall because the rhetoric became too manipulative, turning politics into a contest of style over substance? As you find yourself ready to vote for a bill you haven't actually read just because the speaker made you feel sad about wheat, you start to see the danger of the Asianist style. The struggle you are facing now is the struggle for your own rationality. You know this man is manipulating you. You know that his fact about the grain yield are suspicious. You know that his widow probably doesn't exist. But the octoritas of his delivery is overwhelming. He builds to a crescendo, his voice thundering off the brick walls, his toga swirling around him like a tempest. He hits the final clausula with the precision of a sword strike. He stops. He stands perfectly still. The silence hangs in the air for a heartbeat, and then the curia explodes. Senators are shouting Bene. Good. They are stamping their feet. Even the Padarii in the back are cheering. You find yourself clapping, caught up in the collective effervescence. It takes a full minute for the applause to die down. The speaker sits, looking exhausted but triumphant, wiping sweat from his brow with a corner of his toga. Then the next speaker stands up. It is a stern, stoic man from the opposing faction, a hardcore Atticist. He begins to speak in a flat, monotone voice, listing numbers, dates, and legal precedents. The previous speaker's emotional appeal regarding the widow is irrelevant to the fiscal allocation of the Sicilian tithe, he drones. The mood in the room instantly crashes. It's like turning on the fluorescent lights at a party. You feel a sudden, jarring return to reality. The emotional high evaporates, leaving you feeling foolish and slightly hungover. You look at the boring man. He is telling the truth. He is making sense. But you hate him. You hate him because he broke the spell. You realize that in the Roman Senate, being right is often less important than being interesting. You settle back onto your hard bench, though it's feeling even harder now that the adrenaline has faded. The quiet struggle of the listener is a constant oscillation between being seduced by beauty and being grounded by boredom. You look at the master orator, who is now drinking water and accepting congratulations from his peers. He hasn't solved the grain crisis. He hasn't fixed the roads. But for 1 hour, he made 300 tired, cynical old men feel something. And in a room where people talk for 500 years about nothing, feeling something, anything, is a rare and dangerous luxury. The emotional aftershocks of the orator's performance are finally fading, leaving behind a familiar, hollow silence. But the day is far from over. A new kind of hush falls over Curia as a messenger, breathless and covered in road dust, is escorted onto the floor. He hands a sealed scroll to the presiding consul. The consul breaks the wax seal, reads the contents, and his face goes pale. He stands up, holding the parchment with a trembling hand. Senators, he announces, a dispatch from the proconsul in Gaul. The quiet struggle of boredom instantly evaporates, replaced by the cold, sharp struggle of fear. You sit up straighter. The air in the room seems to drop 10 degrees. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that defined the late Republic. The military command structure was a recipe for anxiety. Roman governors and generals, proconsuls, were given immense power, asterisk imperium asterisk, to wage war in their provinces. But communication was slow. A general could start a war, lose a legion, or conquer a kingdom months before the Senate even heard about it. The Senate was technically in charge, but in reality, they were often just reacting to the fait accompli of ambitious men with armies. You are the board of directors for a company where the regional managers have nuclear weapons and no cell phones. The consul begins to read the letter aloud. It describes a massive uprising of the Helvetii, a tribe on the move. It details the burning of villages, the movement of cavalry, and the urgent need for reinforcements. The prose is sparse, military, and terrifying. You look around the room. The petty squabbles about grain and zoning are forgotten. The garlic-eating senator has stopped chewing. The scribes are writing furiously, capturing every word of the disaster. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night: the laureled letter. If a general won a great victory, he would wrap his dispatch in laurel leaves, symbolizing triumph. If he was in distress, he might attach a feather, symbolizing speed, or use black thread. The physical object of the letter itself was a coded message before a single word was read. You squint at the scroll in the consul's hand. No laurel, just naked parchment and bad news. The quiet struggle here is the struggle of helplessness. You are the masters of the world, Yet you are sitting on a wooden bench in Italy while the fate of the Republic is being decided in a muddy field 1,000 miles away. You can vote to send money. You can vote to send troops. But by the time your order reaches the front, the battle will be over. You are governing by time delay. You realize that your power is an illusion of geography. You are only powerful here, inside these walls. Out there, in the wild, steel decides everything. Now, as the consul finishes reading and the debate opens on how to respond, we reach a point of academic friction that keeps military historians arguing in their war colleges. The Senate versus general debate. Traditionally, we view the Senate as the supreme strategic authority. But modern scholars argue that by the 1st century BC, the Senate had lost control of its war machine. They suggest that the long distances and the loyalty of the soldiers to their specific commanders, who paid them and gave them land, meant that generals like Caesar, Pompey, and Sulla were effectively independent warlords. The Senate was just a rubber stamp that legitimized their private conquests. The debate is, was the Senate directing the expansion of Rome, or was it just frantically trying to keep up with its own rogue employees? You listen to a senior senator propose a decree. He speaks with bluster and confidence, demanding that the general hold the line and restore order. It sounds authoritative, but you look at the faces of the men around you. They know the truth. They know that that general decides to turn his army around and march on Rome instead of the Helvetii. There is nothing, absolutely nothing, this room can do to stop him. The letter isn't a report. It's a threat. The psychological weight of this realization is heavy. You wrap your toga tighter, as if the wool could protect you from a legion. You look at the scribes who are now recording the Senatus Consultum, the official advice of the Senate. It uses strong, commanding language. The Senate decrees, the Senate orders. It is a performance of control. You vote aye along with everyone else, engaging in a collective fantasy that your voice still matters. The messenger takes the decree, bows, and runs out of Curia to ride back north. You watch him go. He is carrying a piece of paper that says, "Stop." You wonder if the 50,000 soldiers on the other end will bother to read it. The quiet struggle of the letter is over, but the fear remains. You are a Roman senator, and you have just realized that the sword is mightier than the stylus. The panic from the general's letter has subsided, settling into a dull, throbbing ache behind your eyes. The messenger has gone. The decree has been sent. The sun is now low in the sky, casting long, melancholy shadows across the floor of the Curia. But as the session drags on into the twilight, you begin to notice a shift in the atmosphere that is far more disturbing than any barbarian invasion. The shouting has stopped. The passionate, tear-jerking rhetoric about widows and wheat has vanished. In its place is a strange, synchronized efficiency that feels entirely alien to the chaotic soul of the Republic. You are watching a debate that isn't a debate at all. You are watching rehearsal. You look at the consul. He is proposing a new law regarding the appointment of provincial governors. In the old days, perhaps just 10 years ago, this would have triggered a riot. Chairs would have been thrown. Cato would have talked until he passed out. But today, the consul speaks and the Senate nods. It's a rhythmic, bobbing sea of white wool. There is no opposition. There is no friction. You realize with a sinking feeling in your gut that the decision wasn't made here. It was made last night in a private dining room over a cup of expensive wine by 3 or 4 men who aren't even bothering to attend the session. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that defines the death of the Republic, the rise of the rubber stamp. We often think of the transition from Republic to Empire as a sudden, violent explosion, the assassination of Caesar, the Battle of Actium. But the real death of liberty happened here, on these wooden benches, in the quiet moments when the Senate decided that survival was more important than power. The institutions remained exactly the same. The consuls were still elected. The Senate still met. The laws were still voted on. But the soul had been scooped out, leaving behind a hollow shell of bureaucracy. You are no longer a governing body. You are a legalization machine for someone else's will. You watch a senior senator stand up to support the motion. He doesn't just agree. He lavishes praise on the wisdom of the proposal. He uses words like divine and providential. It feels gross. It feels like he is auditioning. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night. The ritual of acclamatio, as the Republic rotted into autocracy, the chaotic shouting of the Senate evolved into formalized, rhythmic chanting. Senators would literally chant in unison, like a stadium crowd or a choir. Phrases like, "You're the only one," or "Great is your wisdom," were repeated 10, 20, sometimes 50 times. Scribes would actually record a number of repetitions in the official minutes. Asterisk, the Senate chanted, "Long life to the Emperor," 60 times. Asterisk, you find yourself mumbling along with the chant, your voice lost in the collective drone. Asterisco bene, bene, bene. Asterisk, it's a survival mechanism. If you don't chant, you stand out. If you stand out, you are a target. The quiet struggle has mutated. It is no longer the struggle to be heard. It is the struggle to blend in. You are hiding in plain sight, using your own voice as camouflage. You look at the man next to you, the one who fought for his 6 inches of bench space this morning. He is chanting louder than anyone, his eyes dead and empty. He knows the game. The Senate has become a chorus line, and you are all dancing to the same tune. The physical sensation of this is suffocating. The air in the curia feels stale, recycled. The open doors, which once led in the dangerous roar of the mob, now just frame a view of a city that no longer really belongs to you. You feel a profound sense of obsolescence. You're like a typewriter in the age of the iPad. Still functional, still clicking away, but fundamentally useless to the task at hand. You are performing the rituals of freedom in a cage of inevitability. Now, as the chanting dies down and the vote is passed unanimously, of course, we reach a point of academic friction that keeps political historians debating in their seminars. The diarchy debate. The great German historian Theodor Mommsen proposed that the early empire was a diarchy, a dual rule shared between the emperor and the Senate. He argued that the Senate retained real administrative power and was a junior partner, not a slave. However, a significant group of modern scholars argues that this is a legal fiction. They suggest that the partnership was a charade maintained by the emperors to keep the aristocracy from rebelling. The Senate was allowed to keep its togas, its titles, and its social prestige as long as it never, ever tried to actually rule. The debate is, were you a partner or were you a pet? You look at the empty curule chair at the front of the room. It's waiting for a man who isn't here. Maybe it's Caesar. Maybe it's Augustus. Maybe it's a generic strongman. The chair is empty, but it commands more respect than the 300 living men in the room. You realize that the academic debate doesn't matter. Whether you're a partner or a pet, the collar feels the same. The consul moves to the next item on the agenda, a proposal to rename a month of the calendar after the great leader. You stifle a sigh. This is what you do now. You rename months. You build statues. You vote for holidays. You are the decorators of the state, not the architects. The quiet struggle is the internal battle to maintain your self-respect while engaging in sycophancy. You tell yourself that you are doing this for the stability of Rome. You tell yourself that peace is worth the price of your voice. You tell yourself that you are being pragmatic. But deep down, you know that you are just afraid. You look down at your hands, resting on your knees. They are soft, uncalloused hands. Hands that have never held a plow or a sword, only a stylus and a scroll. You wonder if the Padarii in the back row feel this loss of power as keenly as you do. You glance back. They look relieved. For them, the rubber-stamped Senate is safer. There are no risky votes anymore. There are no dangerous debates. There's only the script. If you follow the script, you get to keep your villa, your wine, and your head. It's a comfortable cage. The sun is dipping below the horizon now, painting the sky in bruised purples and blood reds. The session is winding down. The laws have been passed. The honors have been bestowed. The Senate has successfully done exactly what it was told to do. You feel a heavy, narcotic lethargy settling over you. It's easier this way, isn't it? Thinking is hard. Fighting is dangerous. Letting one man decide everything is restful. You stand up for the final dismissal. The wood of the bench releases its grip on your legs. You wrap your toga around you, feeling the familiar weight of the wool. It feels like a costume now. You are an actor leaving the stage after a matinee performance. You walk the walk, you talk the talk, but the play was written by someone else. You file out of the Curia, joining the stream of white ghosts exiting into the twilight. You are a Roman senator, a ruler of the world, and today, you made absolutely no difference at all. And the most terrifying part? You're okay with that. The magistrate finally stands. He doesn't bang a gavel. Romans didn't have them. But he raises his hand in a gesture of dismissal that is as old as the city itself. Nihil amplius vos morimer, he intones. We detain you no longer. It is the most beautiful sentence you have heard all day. It signals the end of the quiet struggle against gravity, biology, and boredom. The spell of the Senate is broken. The 300 men around you, who have spent the last 12 hours posturing, arguing, and pretending to run the world, suddenly transform back into tired, hungry humans who just want to go home and take off their shoes. You stand up, your knees pop, your back muscles scream in protest as they are forced to straighten out after being curled into a question mark for an eternity. You feel a rush of blood to your feet, a tingling sensation that reminds you that you are still physically alive. You look around the Curia Hostilia. The light has almost completely failed. The high windows, which this morning poured in blinding shafts of white heat, are now squares of deep velvet blue. The statues of the gods, Victory, Liberty, Jupiter, are retreating into shadows, their bronze faces becoming unreadable masks. You wonder what they make of today. They have seen the same scene play out for 5 centuries. They saw the panic when Hannibal was at the gates. They saw the joy when Carthage fell. They saw the terror when Sulla marched on Rome. And today, they saw you vote to rename a month. You wonder if they are bored. 2. You shuffle toward the exit, moving with the herd. The floor is littered with the debris of democracy. You see a broken stylus, a forgotten wax tablet, a crust of bread dropped by a hungry scribe. The majestic, terrifying Senate House looks strangely like a tavern after closing time. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that anchors the finality of your day: the tabularium. As you leave, you watch the scribes gathering up the stacks of wax tablets and papyrus scrolls. They aren't just taking them home. They are taking them to the massive, fortress-like building that looms over the Forum. The tabularium was a state archive, built to house the laws and decrees of Rome for eternity. It was constructed of fireproof stone because the Romans understood that while men die, paperwork must be immortal. Every word spoken today, every rubber stamp vote, every groan of Cato will be filed away in a niche, becoming a part of the official memory of the state. You are leaving, but your words are staying. You step across the threshold and back out onto the comitium steps. The cool evening air hits your face, shocking you with its freshness. It smells of damp stone, river water, and the faint, sweet scent of night-blooming jasmine from the gardens on the Palatine. The roar of the Strepitus has vanished. The Forum is empty. The money changers have packed up their tables. The lawyers have gone to the baths. The beggars have found their corners. The center of the world is sleeping. You turn back to look at the Curia one last time. You see a group of men moving in the shadows of the portico. They aren't senators. They are the apparitors, the civil servants, lictors, and beadles who actually run the building. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night: the ritual of the bar. Closing the Senate House wasn't just about locking a door. It was a security operation. The bronze doors of the Curia were massive, often requiring several men to move. They didn't have a simple key. Instead, they were secured from the inside with a heavy timber beam or serra, and from the outside with complicated knots of rope and wax seals. The apparitors would inspect the seals every morning to ensure no one had broken in during the night to alter a law or plant a bad omen. You watch them now, heaving the heavy bronze leaves shut. Boom! The sound echoes across the empty Forum like a cannon shot. Boom! The second door closes. The click of the locking mechanism is the final period at the end of the day's sentence. You are locked out. The government is closed. You are just a man on the street again. You begin the walk home, your sandals slapping softly against the basalt paving stones. The quiet struggle is over, but a new, internal struggle begins. The struggle of legacy. You think about the 500 years this institution has stood. You think about the men who sat on your bench before you. Scipio Africanus, Cicero, the Gracchi brothers. They all sat there. They all sweated in their wool. They all thought their debates were the most important things in the universe. And now, they are just names in a history book that hasn't been written yet. You realize that the Senate is a machine designed to convert human passion into dust. It takes your anger, your hope, your fear, and your rhetoric, and it grinds them down into laws and precedents until there is nothing left but stone and silence. And yet, you keep coming back. Why? Because the alternative is the sword. Because talking, even boring, endless, repetitive talking, is the only thing holding the chaos at bay. You are a dam builder, and your words are the bricks. Now, as you reach the foot of the Palatine Hill and look up at the stars appearing over the city, we reach the final point of academic friction that keeps historians arguing in their twilight years. The transformation versus death debate. Did the Roman Senate die? Traditional history says yes, that it withered away into irrelevance under the emperors. But a significant group of modern scholars argues that it didn't die, it transformed. They point out that the Senate continued to meet, to debate, and to pass laws for another 600 years after Augustus. It survived the fall of the West. It survived the Goths. There were still Roman senators walking the streets of Rome in the 6th century AD, wearing the same togas, sitting on the same benches, talking about the same drains. The debate is, was it a zombie institution, a walking corpse of the Republic, or was it the ultimate survivor, the cockroach of political systems that refuse to be exterminated? You prefer the survivor theory. It makes you feel less like a ghost. You reach your villa. The doorman, sleepy and startled, opens the gate for you. You step inside, and the heavy wool toga is finally, mercifully, stripped from your shoulders. The weight is gone. You are light. You are free. You walk into your garden, listening to the trickle of the fountain. The water sounds the same as it did this morning. The stars look the same. The city is the same. You spent 12 hours fighting for the world, and the world didn't change a bit. And that, you realize, is the point. The quiet struggle isn't about winning. It's about enduring. It's about keeping the lights on for one more day. You sit down on a cool marble bench, one that has a backrest, thank the gods, and close your eyes. You can still hear the echo of the speeches in your head, a low, rhythmic hum of Latin verbs and nouns. But it's fading now. The rhetoric is dissolving into the night air. You are a Roman senator, a guardian of the Mos Maiorum, a tired old man in a linen tunic. You have survived the boredom. You have survived the terror. You have survived the rubber stamp. You have done your duty. You let your head tip back. The day is done. The doors are locked. The scribes are sleeping. And for the next few hours, until the sun rises and the Strepitus returns, Rome is safe. Not because of what you did, but because you were there to do it. You take a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the night, and finally, truly let go. Now, let the heavy bronze doors of the Senate House stay closed. The echoes of the arguments, the shouting of the corona, and the scratching of the styluses are all fading away, drifting into the silence of history. You don't have to listen to any more speeches tonight. You don't have to worry about the grain supply, or the legions in Gaul, or the mood of the sacred chickens. That is all thousands of years in the past, locked away in the stone archives of time. You are no longer a senator on a hard wooden bench. You are just you, safe in your own bed, supported by soft pillows that demand nothing from you. Feel the weight of the toga lifting from your shoulders, replaced by the gentle, weightless comfort of the night. The quiet struggle is finished. The history books are closed. The dust has settled in the sunbeams, and the sun itself has long since gone to sleep. Imagine the city of Rome turning off its lights, one by one, the torches in the Forum flickering out, the fires in the temples burning down to glowing embers, the 7 hills wrapping themselves in shadows. The only sound left is the wind blowing through the cypress trees and the slow, steady rhythm of your own breathing. You have walked through the centuries tonight. You have seen the power and the boredom, the glory and the dust. But now, the journey is over. The river of time has carried you to a quiet shore. You are safe here. The world will keep turning without your vote. The stars above you are the same ones that watched over Cato and Caesar, and they are watching over you now, silent and steady. Let your mind drift away from the marble and the stone. Let it float into the soft, velvet darkness. You have done enough. You have listened enough. Now it is time to rest. Sleep, traveler. The Republic is at peace, and so are you.